Welcome to this explainer. Today, we are unpacking what is absolutely the foundation of workplace and social survival. We're talking about the 48 laws of power, and we're diving right into the very first law: never outshine the master. It sounds simple, right? But violating this law is a fatal mistake that can literally destroy your career. In this explainer, we're going to break down exactly how this works, looking at some wild historical examples from Nicolas Fouquet to Galileo, and we'll reveal how you can strategically manage the insecurities of your boss. Because let's face it, this dynamic has dictated the rise and fall of brilliant minds throughout all of history, and understanding it is absolutely crucial. So, whether you're climbing the corporate ladder, dealing with a deeply insecure boss, or just trying to navigate a competitive social circle, this explainer is going to completely change how you view your own talents.
Okay, consider this core judgment. Always make those above you feel comfortably superior. In your desire to please and impress them, do not go too far in displaying your talents. Now, I know what you're thinking. It sounds completely backward, doesn't it? We're always taught to work hard, stand out, and show our immense value to the team. But there's a really cruel irony in the dynamics of power. Being too good at your job or letting your talent shine a bit too brightly, well, that could actually destroy your career if you aren't incredibly careful. It can accomplish the exact opposite of what you're aiming for, by triggering fear and insecurity in the very people who hold power over you.
So let's dive into this with a cautionary tale. Section 1, the fatal transgression and the shocking fall of Nicolas Fouquet.
Let's travel back to France. The year is 1661. King Louis XIV, the famous Sun King, had this brilliant finance minister named Nicolas Fouquet. Now, Fouquet was a generous guy, loved lavish parties, pretty women, poetry, the whole shebang. When the prime minister died, Fouquet naturally assumed, hey, I'm next in line for the job. But instead, King Louis actually abolished the position entirely. Fouquet got nervous. He sensed he might be falling out of favor, so he decided to throw literally the most spectacular party the world had ever seen at his brand new chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte. He invited the greatest minds in all of Europe. We're talking a lavish 7-course dinner with exotic foods never before tasted in France, a brilliant new play written by Molière, and this magnificent fireworks display over perfectly geometric gardens. Fouquet thought this massive display of wealth, taste, and connections would make him totally indispensable and just, secure his promotion.
But the timeline of what happened next is just absolutely staggering. The evening itself, a massive success. Everyone agrees it's the most amazing affair they've ever attended. But the very next day, Fouquet is arrested by the king's head musketeer D'Artagnan. 3 months later, he's put on trial for stealing from the country's treasury, which is crazy because most of what he did was actually on the king's behalf. And the final result of this spectacular party? Fouquet was shipped off to the most isolated prison in the Pyrenees Mountains, where he spent the last 20 years of his life in solitary confinement. No promotion, just a prison cell.
The psychology behind the king's reaction here is fascinating. Fouquet thought he was flattering the king with this epic party, but he inadvertently offended his vanity. Louis XIV was a proud, deeply arrogant man who absolutely needed to be the center of attention at all times. Seeing Fouquet's friends and subjects more charmed by the finance minister than by the king himself, that made Louis feel deeply, profoundly insecure. And, of course, Louis wouldn't admit that. Instead, he found a convenient excuse to lock Fouquet up. And get this, the king replaced him with a guy named Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a man who was famous for being stingy and for throwing the absolute dullest parties in Paris.
Which brings us to Section 2, the masterful observance, featuring Galileo's brilliant cosmic strategy.
Now, let's look at a historical figure who faced a very similar dynamic to Fouquet but handled it flawlessly. In the early 1600s, the brilliant astronomer Galileo depended entirely on the generosity of great rulers to survive. And his story brilliantly illustrates the contrast between failure and success. Remember, Fouquet flaunted his own wealth and popularity. He made himself the star of the show. Galileo? He took a totally different approach. Previously, Galileo would gift a new invention to one ruler, dedicate a book to another, and honestly, he constantly lived in insecurity, getting paid in gifts rather than actual cash. But in 1610, he discovered the moons of Jupiter, and he changed his strategy entirely. He didn't divide up the discovery among different patrons, he dedicated it exclusively to the immensely powerful Medici family. Why? Because the Medici dynasty's symbol was Jupiter. Galileo announced that the 4 moons he discovered actually represented the 4 Medici brothers, circling Jupiter just as they revolved around their dynasty's founder. I mean, he literally made the Medicis the absolute stars of the universe.
And the result was immediate and completely life-changing. That same year, 1610, Cosimo II made Galileo his official court philosopher and mathematician, complete with a full, steady salary. You see, Galileo didn't challenge the intellectual authority of his masters. He didn't make them feel like mere wallet holders who were just funding his genius. Instead, he gave them infinite glory by aligning their names with cosmic forces. He made his masters shine brilliantly among all the courts of Italy. And because he did that, his days of begging were over forever.
All right, Section 3, Keys to Power. Let's talk about how to actually apply this law in your own life.
Now, do not fool yourself into thinking human psychology has changed since the days of the Medicis or Louis XIV. Modern bosses still demand to feel secure in their positions, and you have to be incredibly careful because you can accidentally outshine a master simply by being naturally talented or charming. Take Astor Manfredi, the Prince of Faenza back in the year 1500. He was incredibly handsome, generous, just had this great open spirit. When the cruel Cesare Borgia conquered his city, he initially spared the 18-year-old prince. But a few weeks later, Borgia suddenly had him locked in a Roman prison. And a year after that, the young prince was found drowned in the river Tiber. Why on earth did that happen? Because Borgia was notoriously vain. Manfredi's natural talents made Borgia seem less attractive by mere comparison. The lesson here? If you are naturally brilliant or charming, you absolutely must learn to mute those qualities when you're in the company of highly insecure superiors.
Furthermore, never, ever imagine that just because the master loves you, you can do whatever you want. In late 16th century Japan, Senno Rikyu was the premier artist of the tea ceremony, and he was Emperor Hideyoshi's most trusted advisor. But Rikyu let all that favor go to his head. He had a wooden statue of himself made, wearing the sandals of nobility, and he placed it inside the most important temple, right inside the palace gates. To the emperor, this presumption was an unforgivable miscalculation. It showed Rikyu had totally forgotten that his position depended entirely on the emperor. So Hideyoshi had him arrested, and Rikyu was forced to take his own life. The takeaway is brutal but clear. Never take your status for granted.
So how do we actually turn this law to our advantage? Well, first, flatter discreetly. Overt flattery is way too obvious and just looks bad to everybody else. Instead, make your master appear more intelligent than you. Act a little naive. Commit harmless mistakes that don't actually damage your reputation but give you an excuse to ask for their help. Masters absolutely adore bestowing their expertise. Second, if your ideas are more creative, publicly ascribe them to your master. Make it seem like your brilliant idea is merely an echo of their great advice. Third, tone down your own humor and charm. Make sure your master is the real center of attention, the one dispensing the good cheer. Finally, remember that disguising your strengths isn't a weakness. By letting others outshine you, you remain in control rather than becoming a victim of their insecurity. This calculated move is going to come in incredibly handy the day you finally decide to rise above your inferior status.
Section 4, the strategic reversal. Let's look at the exception to the rule. Because every dynamic has a strategic reversal, right? And you can't spend your entire life constantly worrying about upsetting everyone around you. Sometimes, you really must be selectively cruel. So I want to pose this slightly Machiavellian question directly to you. When is it actually safe to take the gloves off and outshine your master?
Well, the answer lies in identifying what is called the falling star. If your superior is a falling star, meaning they're weak, they're actively losing their grip on power, and they're basically ready to fall, there is absolutely nothing to fear from outshining them. Do not be merciful. Your master likely had no such scruples in their own cold-blooded climb to the top. If they're very weak, discreetly hasten their downfall. Outdo them, outcharm them, outsmart them at key moments. Or, simply step back and let nature take its course without any mercy.
However, if your master is firm in their position, you have to hold back. Even if you absolutely know you are more capable, smarter, and way better suited for the job, you have to bide your time and be patient. It's just the natural course of things that power eventually fades and weakens. Your master will fall someday. If you play it right, if you disguise your brilliance and survive their reign, you'll outlive them, and someday you will easily outshine them.
And that brings us to Section 5, Conclusion and Key Takeaways.
We've seen how outshining the master cost a minister his freedom and a prince his very life, and how mastering this law brought Galileo eternal prestige. The core philosophy here is beautifully captured in this simple metaphor. There can be only one sun at a time. Never obscure the sunlight or rival the sun's brilliance, rather fade into the sky and find ways to heighten the master's star's intensity. The stars in the sky might be just as brilliant as the sun, but they never ever dare to appear in her company. Let your master be the sun.
heighten their intensity, make them feel exceptionally secure, and you will attain the absolute heights of power without painting a massive target on your back.
If you found this breakdown valuable, please make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss our future explainers on mastering the laws of power. And I want to leave you with a slightly dangerous question to ponder regarding your own life right now. Think about it. Whose sunlight are you currently obscuring, and what are you going to do about it tomorrow? Thanks for learning with me, and I'll see you in the next one.